Well, good evening, everyone. I'll get started here. I see people are still coming in to the meeting, but we can kind of just, open it up, and I'll start with some, kind of generalized comments. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. It's your energy and your commitment to MLR over the decades really keeps us going. It was 30 years ago that a group of cabin owners on Pine Island in Lake Vermilion started MLR to protect Minnesota's lake and river heritage. Their initial focus was property taxes. They saw property taxes as being confiscatory. That was when they really started to kind of balloon the first time around. At that point in time, property tax on a cabin was 2.25% of value instead of about 1%. And we were able to get that down and get some other laws in place over the years, and that was really our focus. But now, as water quality issues have become more and more and more important. 30 years ago, AIS wasn't really a concern. Farm runoff and tiling wasn't really a concern. The mining wasn't as big a deal then as it is now. So we've had to kind of broaden our mission. And I think it's due to your energy that we've really punched above our weight since we started out. It's a highly committed membership. And unlike many organizations that I deal with as executive director, we're not a special interest group. We're actual citizens focused on a public good. I looked in the database today, and about half of the members that we have, half of the supporters MLR has, have been supporting us for over a decade. And I wanted to really, let you know how grateful we all are to you, and to let you know that without you, MLR wouldn't exist. I want to thank the Lake Association leaders, the people who step forward and engage with their lake associations on these issues, the individuals, the businesses, the dozens of government and non-government organizations that have partnered with MLR over the years. And to that end, in the last year, really, as kind of to encapsulate what we've been doing for the last year, how we've been spending our time. We've been doing a really deliberate, significant outreach and listening effort. And everybody has one thing in common. We have a commitment to water and protecting water in the state of Minnesota. The board is kind of key to our success. It's an all-volunteer board. We have, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. Barbara Halbach and Fishberg, and then Sue Hankin Thielen is our vice president. John James is the treasurer, and he's leading the KGSK Save Our Lakes initiative. You can find that initiative on the Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Protection and Education page. You'll find a link to it on our page. Mary Manns was a former president of the organization. She's up in Caribou Lake in St. Louis County, very engaged with her lake association. Judy Corrigan, who's a lead organizer, Mackey lead organizer, Midwest Active Citizenship Initiative. And she's been working on Up the Creek Meets. She's in Burnsville, and her place is in Pelican Lake in Cass County. The first step is to show up and listen. And our goal in having this outreach over the last year was to identify the challenges facing both our lakes and rivers. So what are the issues? And what are the challenges of the networks of lake association and civic organizations that are working to protect and restore them? And the first step was really we invited the people that we spoke with to help us define the problem. We attended over 30 Lake Association meetings, and thank you to everyone who invited us. We met with dozens of Lake Association leaders one-on-one. We hosted over a dozen focus groups and specific issue meetings with Lake Association leaders and others around the state. And these discussions informed the board during our strategic planning retreat in November, just a few weeks ago. And we organized this outreach effort into a set of strategic priorities that I'm going to share with you tonight. Thank you to all of you who took the time to meet with me and invite me to your events and meetings, who hosted me, those of you who email me or call the office. I know that many of you stepped forward to serve as sort of field organizers for MLR, to share MLR's message with other civic leaders in the Lake Association world. We're very grateful for all this energy. We also attended meetings and presentations from dozens of government and non-government agencies in Minnesota. And we're really at a key moment in our history here. Despite the hundreds of millions of dollars spent on clean water issues like AIS and research into fisheries and on-the-ground water quality programs like settling ponds, it's about 256 million sort of back of the napkin spending in the state of Minnesota on water quality. Water quality continues to decline. Last month, the MPCA added almost 100 more lakes to the impaired waters list. Water is nonpartisan. MLR is nonpartisan. Our supporters are both Democrats and Republicans, and I have yet to meet one person in Minnesota that does not value clean and healthy water. Clean water is clearly a public good, and working to advance a clear public good in a democracy is a political act. So we're nonpartisan, but highly political. And this is a huge advantage. We're not pulled into partisan struggles. And then the other advantage really that our lake advocates have is our geographic distribution of lake associations and county coalitions of lake associations. And this allows MLR supporters to deliver a unified and coordinated message and call to action at both local government, county government, and state government levels. Civic organizing, as refined by the Midwest Active Citizenship Initiative, is a new approach to organizing and structuring an advocacy base. I think I got ahead here. And MLR reorganized our board and became a civic organization, joined Mackey 5 years ago. In the last year, we were able to organize at least 3 pilot organizing agencies. And these are comprised of a number of key partners. If you look at this list of logos, basically, this is just from one of these organizations, the Northern Stop Starry Pilot. And these are the groups of people that we've brought into the work. So, we've got agency, we've got local government, we've got lake associations, we have AIS coordinators from multiple neighboring counties, trying to coordinate our effort to prevent the spread of AIS in general and starry stonewort in particular. There's also the AIS Boundary Waters Collaborative that's working on this. That group includes members of, we've had Chamber of Commerce. Carrie Oli Cusack, one of our board members, is the lead organizer on that project, along with Lily Carr, our intern. DNR is engaged, Forest Service is engaged, AIS coordinators from Cook, Lake, Northern St. Louis County Soil and Water Conservation District. They're engaged. A number of lake associations from that area. 1854 Treaty Authority is engaged. Couple of other tribal representatives have dipped in and out. And then we've had members from the Quatico Superior, which is the the Canadian side of the Boundary Waters engaged. The Southern Stop Starry effort is just getting we're in the nascent period of organizing it. But this is really the idea, is to build these local organizing agencies to work together for the common good. The Stop Starry program is one of the things that we're organizing around. That, and then Lake Steward is the other one. And this simply provides boat cleaning equipment at lake accesses infested with starry stonewort. And then we use the civic organizing model to support an increased use of this equipment. To date, we've installed 28 boat cleaning stations at accesses. In addition, our partners, the Cass County group, working with their AIS coordinator, and the ACL, the Association of Cass County Lakes, has installed over 50 boat cleaning tool stations, to expand the reach of the program. And we're working to unify message across these, 3-4 counties and organizations, and get a local hub. We're working to make sure people clean their boats. It's I believe it's we're organizing groups to participate in the Starry Trek, AIS detectors, new infestation response plans. The partners, particularly the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwa and the Cass County AIS, and then Bruce Anspec up in Beltrami, are testing and out different ways of controlling starry stonewort, either hand pulling or mats, or using the diver assisted suction harvest. With the CD3 equipment in place, we've recorded over 22,000 uses since the equipment was installed. So that's 22,000 self-inspections that happened on accesses that are often very remote, or maybe there's no inspector there. So I think that's pretty powerful. The strategic priorities set by these local pilots include continued awareness campaigns, early detection efforts, treatment options. MLR sent over 28,000 emails to lake home and cabin owners in the area to encourage them to use the free waterless cleaning stations. Part of the message was Take the Pledge, which is a community-based social marketing program launched by the DNR. I talked to Doug Jensen after that effort, and he said that they picked up 300, nearly doubling the participants from this email. And by partnering together, we're able to leverage funds. We helped develop a video series with some of our partners messaging Stop the Starry efforts. Latent Broadcasting, Minnesota DNR, MLR, and MACERC shared and aired these videos. Combined, we had a total of 160,000 impressions. And I'd like to thank Erica Gilsdorf for helping bring this together and doing the work, and really leading on this project. It was a wonderful thing. And once we bring on staff and increase our capacity, I think we can expand and support more of these organizing agencies. And now it is, we'll kind of switch gears to Lake Steward, which is Lily. Lily, do you want to come on now?
Hi, I'm Lily Carr. I'm interning at Minnesota Lakes and Rivers. I started working there this spring. And yes, as Jeff said, I've been working on the Lake Steward program. So I think some of you have heard my spiel before, but you'll get to hear it again now. So in order to protect water quality, we have to understand that the health of our lakes is directly linked to how we manage our land. So the Lake Steward program is designed to promote knowledge and a shared sense of stewardship among neighbors. MLR started carrying the program 3 years ago in 2021 after seeing how successful it was on the Gull chain of lakes. Dorothy Whitmer, Sheila Johnston, and Chris Dreesen, among others at the Gull chain of lakes, began the program there in 2019. And then the process, you can go forward, Jeff, if you don't mind, a couple slides. The process is, number one, a volunteer will watch a training video from MLR. Something exciting is that we are updating these videos right now. So they're going to include some more information about how to choose native plants, a little bit about the science behind protecting water quality, and more information on how to use our evaluator tool. And then once a lake association has adopted the Lake Steward program and a volunteer has come forward and been trained, the Lake Association will inform its community members about the program and direct them to the Are You a Lake Steward quiz. And then quiz responses will be automatically sent to Lake Association volunteer evaluators who can reach out and schedule a site visit. So then the third step is that site visit by the volunteer. More exciting news is the evaluator tool that those evaluators will use is newly developed in partnership with Paul Radomski at the DNR. And the tool provides questions with pictures that direct evaluators kind of in what to look for on their evaluation. And then at the end, a score will be generated for the property with a passing grade, a Lake Steward sign can be awarded. And then when the property owner displays the Lake Steward sign at the end of their dock, it celebrates the protection of water quality and encourages neighbors to do the same. The sign also promotes the Lake Association and MLR, showing people what we're doing and how to get involved. And then some benefits of the program, obviously more shoreline protected. So each lot that isn't leaching phosphorus into a lake means that 100 pounds less of algae are in the lake every year. And the more people join the effort, the greater the impact we can have. Another benefit is going through this program is a great way to learn. There are many resources available related to this program, such as the Shoreland Guide to Lake Stewardship, which is we're going to be making that available through an order form in the beginning of January. I'll say more about that in a minute. And then another benefit is adopting this program is a great way to get in touch with local resource managers for grant opportunities and support, as well as information. And then, like I said before, there's a space at the bottom of the Lake Steward sign for a Lake Association logo to go. And that way, each Lake Steward will also be promoting that connection to fellow lakeshore property owners and increasing membership in lake associations. And then obviously the return of wildlife on the property is one of the things that I hear lake stewards talk about the most and celebrate the most. And it's just that there's the return of birds and loons using their shoreline to nest, and native flowers and everything. The Shoreline Guide for Lake Stewardship, like I said before, which is that book in the top left corner, is going to be available for cost to members through an order form that we'll be sending out in early January. And our goal is to grow this program statewide. Right now, we're early in the process, just being 3 years in, but research shows that once a critical mass of 15% of a population adopts a behavior, that is when it starts to gain more momentum. So there are 500 lake associations in the state right now, and a goal of 15% of those would be 75 lake associations. So some outcomes for Lake Steward. After 3 years of this program, we have 27 lake associations involved, which is up 20% from last year. And we have had 223 Lake Steward quizzes taken just this year, and we have awarded 44 new Lake Stewards this year. Total, more than 8.3 miles of shoreline have been impacted so far in Minnesota, and more than 28,209 pounds of phosphorus have been sequestered, and that means more than 14 tons of algae have been prevented in the lakes. And so the future of Lake Steward includes partnerships with Metro Blooms for shoreline restoration and native plant education. And then, like I mentioned before, this summer, I'm excited that we'll get to use a better and more comprehensive tool, that Survey 123 tool, thanks to Paul and the DNR. And I put a screenshot of it up on the slide there. That is its GPS feature, so we can do better mapping of where Lake Stewart is, and how it's impacting lakes. And then also, like I said, easier access to the Shoreland Guide to Lake Stewardship this winter, because of course, more publicity equals more lake stewards. And on that note, in July, a CBS film crew with WCCO went up to Gull Lake and they filmed a segment on Lake Stewart where they interviewed Dorothy Whitmer. They flew a drone off her dock and they filmed a family receiving the Lake Stewart Award to draw attention to the issue of shoreline degradation and the amazing efforts that are being done to keep lakes healthy. So this project is new and growing every year with increasing interest statewide, and I am excited to see where it goes. And that's all I have to say about that. I'll hand it back to Jeff to tell us about another great program that we're doing.
And if you have interest, you can email Lily at mnlakesandrivers.org. And she is pretty good at getting back to people. One of the, when we were doing our strategic planning for the board, we're always looking to do the legislative agenda. And this year it's a short session. It starts in mid-February and ends mid-May. So it's just, a few months there. And last year was the spending year. This year is policy. So it'll be a really quick and very dense session, kind of as background. Our efforts are going to be twofold. We passed a lot of legislation last year. One of the things, and making sure that legislation is implemented is key. And I have this note, the port of entry for AIS inspection. Back in, I believe it was 2014, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill asking the Minnesota DNR and the Department of Transportation to put together a plan. What would it look like to have AIS inspection at port of entry into Minnesota? And that was never done. It was one of those bills that passed and it was never done. And the legislature moved on and changed hands, and it just slipped through the cracks. And so one of our goals really is to bring that back. Hydrilla, which is a terrible AIS, very destructive, was recently discovered in Michigan. And we got some reports on up in the Boundary Waters AIS group, the ABC collaboration. DNR did a roadside inspection, and they had close to a 50% violation rate up in northern Minnesota. And most of the boats were from out of state. So I think a lot of people are coming across from Wisconsin into Duluth and then heading north on vacation, and they're not pulling their plugs and draining their water and cleaning their boats. And we need to get our arms around that, so we're going to follow up on that this next legislative session. The boater education and certification, that has to be brought to fruition. The plan is due at this next coming legislature. There was language last year on the mandatory decontamination of infested watercraft. It used to be that you could only order decontamination if a decontamination unit was present on the access. That was changed. You can now order decontamination by a decontamination unit, even if the unit is not present on the access. So you have a decon station in town and inspectors or a conservation officer out on the landing, and they can order a boat to go and get decontaminated. Well, what does that look like? How do we track the boats? Make sure that people are following through. What does that mechanism look like? That hasn't been determined yet. There was language requiring the DNR to put together a 5-year plan and submit it to the legislature. that includes a coordinated plan with other partners like the tribes, lake associations, the county AIS programs, and DNR, bring everything together so that we're leveraging each other's capacity and getting the most bang for our buck and the best coverage of our state. That nothing really, we need to follow up on that. And then the last piece was, we were able to pass back 2017, 2018, I think. People wanted to put a conservation easement on their shoreline and protect it. But then the assessors were assessing it at full market value, as if no conservation easement existed. We were able to get that language adjusted so that assessors are required to adjust lost value to shoreline property after a conservation easement, but they haven't been doing it, or in some cases they haven't been doing it. Then there's increase the AIS fines. I think they should be in line with the fines for poaching a deer. We need reliable and ongoing funding for local AIS management grants. They've been anywhere from 0 to 450,000 to 875,000 to 1.2 million for a couple of years, and now back to 450,000. That's really hard to plan a program, and it's not nearly enough money to meet the need. And then this AIS surcharge on a 3-year boat license. We were able to get it. We lobbied to get it to $10.60 is what the number they came up with, which was just sort of inexplicable to me at the time. Why the extra 60 cents? I don't know. But it needs to be about 20. And that would provide reliable funding to MACERC and local lake association, AIS prevention and management plan programs, and county programs. It's really necessary. At the Lake Association meetings I attended, and then, we have other areas. So that was the AIS, and now there's a lake health kind of focus on our legislative agenda. And this came up at most of the Lake Association meetings that I was at. Really this idea of damage to lake beds and shorelines due to poor boating practices, particularly by the new and larger and more powerful wake surfing watercraft. Then there's lakes are the only natural resource in the state that local property owners must pay to manage. Imagine if the state asked the people who own property adjacent to a state park to pay for the management of that park. Lake associations are spending over $6.25 million collectively on lake management projects. And one of the largest areas of focus is the aquatic plant management programs on these lakes. MLR recently surveyed lake associations to try and get an understanding of how this permitting process was working, how it might be improved. And what we found was 74% of the respondents reported current problems with aquatic plants on Minnesota Lake. 77% of those lakes report that they are organizing to combat the problem within their lake communities. 80% of lake associations feel that the city, county, or state should be responsible for maintaining a healthy plant community in Minnesota lakes. Almost 90% report that homeowners and lake associations have had to take responsibility for it. Only 31% of respondents felt that the DNR is proactively working to solve nuisance plant issues. And while 92% have sought to gain permits for their own treatment, less than 15% of the total feel that the DNR has organized itself efficiently to address their concerns. So in working to increase the AIS management grants, MLR will continue to work to streamline the permitting process and coordinate these efforts across the state. We're leading a coalition of state and local organizations to advance shoreline protection and restoration. The Lake Steward Program is a part of this effort. We are working to align shoreline efforts around the Lake Steward program and create governmental supports for shoreline protection and restoration. So this is building stronger connections between Lake Steward programs at the local level, soil and water conservation districts, watershed districts, maybe even businesses that do shoreline restorations. Kind of bring it together and make it a statewide thing. So people that are traveling all across the state will see these Lake Steward signs. They will understand what's happening with them and why it's important to protect shoreline. And we're also going to lobby to increase the focus and scientific inquiry into harmful algae blooms and other impacts from warming water temperatures in Minnesota. And then property taxes. Property taxes are increasing due to escalating market value, and this remains a top priority. In many areas of the state, as the value of lakeshore increases more quickly than homestead or commercial and industrial property, the property tax burden shifts onto the lakeshore property. And we will continue to pursue tax fairness in an effort to protect our lake and river heritage. Another strategic priority that emerged from MLR's outreach this last year was the need to build capacity. Lake associations struggle to expand their membership. They struggle to find and retain volunteers to do the work of the association. They struggle with a lack of capacity. And since lake associations are the biggest on the ground protectors of lake and river quality, and much of the protection of management of lakes and rivers falls to these lake associations, increasing their capacity protects water. So it's a key focus of ours. And it was interesting talking to lake association people this summer. We have the same issues, a lack of capacity. We need more resources to increase our effectiveness and create sustainability for this organization. Simply put, I think it is time for MLR to grow. We must build greater capacity on our organization and in the community of lake associations and lakeshore property owners that we serve. Part of this effort was to reach out to the corporations that have been our partners over the years, and we are grateful for their support. If you know of a lake-related business that has been a trusted partner, please let us know so that we can reach out to them. Another key strategic priority that emerged from our focus groups and listening sessions was the need to increase awareness. And this really goes with the idea of capacity. So I think as people become aware of the issues that our lakes are facing and how quickly things are changing out on the lakes, the impairments are growing, there'll be more people interested in joining lake associations and MLR and helping with this work, but we got to let them know. As awareness of lake issues and the role that lake associations and MLR play in advancing these solutions increases, I think this will drive increased membership and interest in lake associations and MLR. One of the ideas that came out of our focus groups was billboards. The problem is that many lake people do not even know that a lake association exists on the lake that they're going to visit, and much less they don't know anything about Minnesota Lakes and Rivers advocates. And the idea is to have 4 billboards, kind of as a start, as a pilot, either for northbound traffic or southbound traffic located on key up north corridors or within heavy lake traffic country. Our audience is really people who care about Minnesota lakes, the recreationalists, the property owners. And we try and have these billboards up from May through August or September, depending on what we can afford to do. Going north, the message could be simple, very few words: love a lake, join Minnesota Lake Associations, or catch a fish. Lake associations spend over $500,000 annually on fish stocking. And then the billboards will have a link to a website that has a list of MLR Lake Association partners. It'll be an URL that's easy to remember, like, lovelakes.com. And when people go to this page, they'll be able to see all the lake associations in the state and click on the links to the lake association of the lake they're going to. The restructuring lake association membership, partnerships, really. And a lot of the groups where, there's this idea of a membership, partnership, support, contributor. Some people pointed out that the rate that people pay, per member on our forms hasn't changed since 2002. And so we're having conversations with lake associations about, how can we help you build your membership, increase awareness locally for your lake association and the work you're doing, and how can you help us? Our last newsletter contained a blog post from the Big Pine Lake Association President Tom Hubbard. And what they did was they decided to try a pilot, and they increased their contribution to buy an MLR membership for their members. And now the members receive all of MLR's newsletters and webinars and invitations, all of that information. Tom Hubbard, the president of Big Pine Lake, wrote, and I quote, "By offering BPLPOA members the resources of MLR, including its monthly newsletter, we build awareness and ultimately create a larger, more educated base that can help protect Big Pine Lake and the impact public policy decisions in St. Paul. By helping MLR educate, advise, consult, promote, direct, initiate, and lobby to protect all of Minnesota's lakes and rivers, we are serving the BPLPOA mission, preserving and enhancing the quality of our lakes. Our board knows that educating our lakeshore owners and visitors to the threats and issues regarding our water is its single most important function. Lake and river protection begins with awareness. By partnering with MLR, our members will more deeply understand the wide array of challenges our lakes now face. Having an informed membership ultimately helps the board build support and volunteerism for efforts specific to Big Pine Lake. By helping MLR spread its message and increasing its members, we are helping ourselves." And we're grateful to Big Pine Lake for trying this. Other lakes are trying slightly different models. Please contact me if you have any ideas, if you want to be part of these focus groups. I think that, building capacity among lake associations and MLR is really a key piece of pushing back against the threats that we have to our lakes right now. We have a social media effort. MLR has 2,500 followers on Facebook. We post a few times a week. In the last 28 days, our posts have reached 15,540 people. We've had 1,200 engagements. And if you're not following MLR on social media, please do, and share our posts and help expand our followers and get the word out. And then finally, media, like the article that, or the news story on WCCO that Lily mentioned. We really need to expand our capacity so we can generate a consistent stream of success stories and pro-Lake Association MLR stories in local weeklies, on television, on cable access channels. We're working on a partnership with Lake Country Journal and other media. Lake associations can benefit from media on lake issues and the work they're doing in their local, markets, and then continue to work with Erica to develop video content that lake associations can use to promote their organizations locally. One of the things, MLR really is a three-pronged approach. It's organizing a base of people and developing awareness so they understand the issues, supporting science to get the best science available for these issues, educating people with the best science, and really focusing resources at the state capitol on science. MLR worked with Dr. Peter Sorensen when he was creating the MACIRC, the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center. We've been lobbying to get them funding for years. I know that many people, contribute directly to MACIRC. I think it was 2 years ago, we were able to develop ongoing reliable funding of $910,000 a year that's going from the general fund directly to Macer. And this is our lobbying budget. So, it's possible to leverage the amount of resources that can be raised for Macer by supporting our efforts to lobby. Another example of this is the St. Anthony Falls Lab, which is a really cool place. Lily and I got an opportunity to tour there a couple weeks ago. It's at St. Anthony Falls. The water from the falls is diverted and actually moves through the lab through these various hydrological experiments that they have. They're studying fluid dynamics, river behavior, gravel beds, all kinds of things in this lab. It was built a long time ago, so it's very old. But when the questions came up about what are the impacts of wake surfing watercraft and then boats in general on our lakes, wakes on shoreline, how much energy do they have? What about the prop thrust? How deep does that go into the water? How deep do you need to be to ensure that your prop thrust isn't disturbing aquatic plants and all of these sediments that have accumulated on the bottom? We were really happy to work with Jeff Marr and support his efforts. We started working with Mincola, a couple of other groups, Gabriel Jabor at Lake Minnetonka, to initiate a crowdfunding program. We developed a National Lake Association meeting where executive directors and people from lake associations across the country meet to discuss this issue. We reached out to them. They were able to contribute money to get the first phase of the research off. Last year, I'm happy to report, we worked at the Capitol and Jeff Marr, who's leading this program, testified, and they were able to get funding from the LCCMR, Legislative Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources, which is the lottery money. Portion of the lottery money goes into a fund, and LCCMR makes recommendations as to how to appropriate this. And Jeff was able to get money to do phase 2 and phase 3. And Jeff, if you're there, they just pulled off the water a couple weeks ago. I know.
I'm here. Oh.
Jeff,
Hi there.
I'll let you take it away.
All right. That's perfect. Thanks, Jeff. Well, thanks for the invitation to be here, and it's great to sit in and listen to Jeff and Lily's comments. And I'm going to just take a second and switch to my screen.
Share, Jeff. Yeah.
There you go. Can you see it? All right, you're seeing it, right, Jeff?
I'm seeing it.
Okay. So, thanks for having us. And I'm joined by my close colleague, Andy Riescraft. So Andy's on as well. And the two of us have been working on this effort for about 3 years now, over 3 years. And so what we're going to do tonight, just to kind of emphasize and extend what Jeff just presented, is a quick update on the work that we've been doing, the body of work over these 3 years. We just have about 15 slides, so we'll try to keep it quick. Some of you have seen this material, some of this material before, if you've seen us present. And I just wanted to, first I'm going to figure out how to advance. There we go. It's really important. This is probably the most important slide here, is to acknowledge how do we do our work? Where is the funding coming from? And Jeff, your summary was really fantastic. I was going to spend a little time talking about it, but you really covered the aspects of how this all started. And I think it's maybe what I'll say is, so Andy and I and our team that we work with, about 4 other people on this effort at St. Anthony Falls Lab. We're a university facility. Jeff's right, we're an old lab. We're actually 85 years old today, or this month. was when the laboratory was commissioned. We are professional researchers. We're academics. We get up every day and we work on research projects that have application to the state, to the nation, or business and industry even. But what we aren't is politicians. We're not legislators. We're not rule makers, managers of natural resources. And so that's where, in this case, Minnesota Lakes and Rivers really has had from the very beginning, major impact in us and what we've been able to accomplish. So everything from at the beginning, from kind of making us aware of the issues around these boats and about the concerns that are emerging in the state, helping us get crowdfunding off the ground for the first time, even the idea like, hey, why don't we try a crowdfunding, and then supporting messaging that out to all of you and to the members of MLR. That is huge. Andy and I don't have a communications group. We don't have a marketing team. And so to be able to tap into those groups, like-minded people that have concerns, it's been invaluable to us. And then on the back end of the research, able to communicate out what we've done, to let people know when we've published, to give us opportunity to present our work is super important. Again, how else can we do that? Kind of stuck at the university. It's really invaluable to have this group that can help connect us and communicate out, which is one of the challenges that universities and academics have, is how do we get that science out to people? So I'll leave it at that. I just, we really appreciate the support Jeff has provided us, and that all of you have provided us over these last few projects. So what we want to do here is just talk a bit about what have we done. The program that we hatched here back in 2020 is called the Healthy Waters Initiative. Right now, this program is focusing on recreational boating. And we've got 3 different phases of work that we're focusing on. The first phase is complete and published in February 2022. This was work that worked out on Lake Independence in the West Metro, where we were looking at measuring and quantifying wake waves produced by recreational boats, including non-wake surf boats and wake surf boats. The second phase is underway right now. This is to measure, quantify what we're terming propeller wash produced by recreational boats, again, including wake surf and non-wake surf boats. And this field work the first portion was completed in 2022. Data analysis is ongoing, and we hope to publish this, targeting to publish this in spring of 2024. And the third phase is mentioned by Jeff, the LCCMR funding, or the funding from the Environmental Natural Resources Trust Fund in Minnesota. That was awarded to us in June of this year. And that project, I'll talk a bit about it at the end, but we're quantifying the impacts of wake waves, as well as wind waves and propeller wash. And then in this project, we're kind of moving away from just characterizing the wave heights and the energy, and trying to connect that into water quality and environmental impacts. So it's a really exciting project, 3-year project that we're just getting going on here. So let's just talk on this slide quickly, introduction to boat waves. Again, if you've seen us talk, we've been presenting this, but it's a nice slide that talks about the physics of surface waves. So the physics of surface water waves, vessel wakes, is a really complex and rich topic in fields of naval architecture, even fundamental fluid dynamics. People have been puzzling over these wave effects that you can see in this image for better than 100 years. And they're just fascinating phenomena that really form. We kind of take them for granted. Sometimes we don't see all the effects that are going on here. I think this picture really shows a lot of the complexity that's there. And we highlight three features that we're really looking at in our work. The divergent wave is what we studied in the first phase of the project. These are waves that come off the side of the boat, off the hull, and they move somewhat laterally to the boat direction. And they're the ones that move up onto the shoreline into the littoral zones and ultimately intersect the shoreline. Propeller wash is what we're studying in the second phase. You can see a nice image of it, the trail of disturbance that's directly behind the boat. You can probably visualize here. These are probably bubbles coming to the surface from the exhaust from this boat. That's propeller wash projected vertically down into the lake. And then there's another wave that is called a transverse wave. And you can see them really well in this photograph here. These are waves that are created off the back of the boat. They actually are moving in the same direction of the boat, and they move more or less at the same speed of the boat. So when you're in your boat looking backwards, these waves just tend to follow you. In fact, when you're on board, you don't even realize that they're a wave train that is forming behind you. So those are the phenomena we want to look at here. I'll just point out that the transverse wave is unique in this context because it only forms at speeds below hydroplaning. So for wake surf boats, these are really common and prevalent waves, and we're seeing them have an important role in some of the impacts. So just introducing a couple of the effects we want to keep watching here as we move forward. Similarly, in this slide, I wanted to just summarize different conditions that our boats go through when we're operating them. So displacement versus hydroplaning, hydrodynamic hull conditions of recreational boats. And the top one is termed displacement mode. And by the way, these are terms that we take from naval architecture. And this is a condition that's quite slow. So imagine pulling away from your dock or slowly pulling up to your dock. You're just moving quite slowly, less than 10 miles an hour for something like a 23-foot boat. The hull is at maximum draft. And we put some of the examples here: maneuvering, trolling, fishing. That would be a displacement mode. On the bottom of the slide is on hydroplane or on plane. This is when our boats are traveling around greater than 15, 18 miles per hour. The boat rises up on top of the water surface, and it's got minimal contact with that water surface. And it happens to be the condition with the lowest drag on the hull of the boat. And this is the condition for activities where we're going to be water skiing or wakeboarding, tubing, or just cruising around the lake at a high speed. It's the middle condition that is really kind of emerging here. This is a subplaning condition, and all of you who've been in boats know of this condition. It's one that we write here. It's a transition region between the upper and the lower conditions. It happens when you're accelerating. The boat starts to rise up out of the water, and the friction on the hull becomes a maximum. You're really plowing water, and then the boat rises up on top of the water as it accelerates into that hydroplaning condition. So typical boats like this hydroplaning boat probably passed through that. It did pass through that condition up to hydroplane. What's interesting to note here is for wake surfing, this is the condition where we're going to operate the boat. It's between 10 and 15 miles an hour for the boats we're seeing on lakes. This is a condition that the hydrodynamics result in large waves. And so this is why these boats are designed to operate at this speed, because they create a lot of plowing and a big wave behind the boat. So let's dive in a little bit into the phases just to give you updates. We're not going to spend time on phase one. We've presented on that here with MLR in the past, and our paper is available. We focused on divergent wake waves, how big and powerful are the wake waves produced by boats. And that resulted in this report published in February 1st, 2022. And I put the link up here in case you want to take a picture of that and haven't seen the report. What's interesting is that report's been downloaded over 13,000 times. And that is a fantastic amount compared to other reports that SAFL has published over its 85 years. It's easily the top downloaded report from St. Anthony Falls Lab for our, St. Anthony Falls generated self-published reports. So pretty fantastic interest in this topic. And again, thanks to MLR for helping spread the word about this deliverable. The second phase started kind of in January of 2022. This project focuses on the propeller wash, so measure and quantify characteristics of propeller wash produced by boats. So some of the questions we entered this project with is, what depth does propeller wash begin to interact with the lake bottom? What happens when it does? How long does it take for the turbulence of the prop wash to subside? And what are the magnitudes of velocities and turbulent fluctuations of the wash? Again, our hope was to move this work from just discussion and anecdotal observation to numbers. And then our goal originally was to produce a report by this time in 2023. And we'll talk a little bit about why we've paused that and are focusing on it 6 months from now or so. So this work is underway. And this is a image on the side of here from one of our study lakes that shows what the field setup looks like. So this is an aerial photograph where Andy has put in diagram of the setup. And what we have out on the lake, we deploy buoys that help the drivers of the boat navigate. So there's these yellow start and stop positions, and they're in a straight line. And then we deploy 2 locations in the lake. They're separated by 350 feet, where we set up 2 additional buoys. And in the center of between those, what we call goal posts, is the sensor, which sits on the lake bottom looking upwards towards the water surface. And there are 2 sensors where we do that. One is both are velocity sensors. One is called an acoustic Doppler velocimeter, and the other is acoustic Doppler current profiler. And so you hear acoustic in both of those. They're using really high frequency sound to make velocity measurements in the water column. They're really sophisticated, very robust instruments. We're lucky to have them. And the data we're getting from these are really, really interesting. The colored lines here are the actual boat paths. So the boats get set up with sensors that tell us their position and their movement in the water, their speed, their direction, their pitch angle, and all kinds of attitude on the boat. So this is Andy's extracted the actual position of the boat. Looks like 4 different passes here. So you can see the actual pathway of the boats, and we do a lot of work with that information as well. The way we do these, we have 2 different operating conditions that we're testing these boats under for the tests. So we're doing for wake surf boats, they're on plane at around 20 miles an hour, and we're also looking at a surfing condition. And for non-wake surf boats, there's also a planing condition and then a displacement mode where the boat's going at a cruising speed that we believe is typical use for these boats. And then we do replicates of every condition. So we do 5 passes of each of these conditions listed above. So we've got replication in our research. And what does that data look like? We'll just include a few images of what kind of data we're getting. We've taken off the some of the actual distances because I know some of you are going to screenshot this and try to actually figure out how deep this is all going. But you'll just have to wait and see. Here is the setup. We've got the bottom of the lake at the bottom of the figure. The surface is up here. And the x-axis on the bottom is time in minutes. So you can see 0 is when the boat hits the sensor. It goes over the sensor, and this is 4 minutes later. What we're seeing in this is essentially like a fish finder. This is called the echo sounder. And it sits, again, at the bottom of the lake, and it's pinging sound upwards towards the water surface. And what we get is a really beautiful, strong reflection off of this, the boat. And what we're seeing here, we believe, is the bubbles that are injected from the exhaust of the boat into the prop wash plume. And those bubbles are pounded down into the water column. And so they're really strong reflectors for the acoustics. And you can see how nicely this picks up kind of the bottom interface of bubbles over time. And those bubbles persist in the water greater than 4 minutes after that boat has passed. So very interesting. And again, another echo plot. This is showing the same boat under 2 conditions. So the plot on the left is a boat that's hydroplaning. And the boat on the right is a boat that's surfing. So this is the same boat operated at hydroplaning and at surf speed. This is a wake surf boat. And you can see just qualitatively differences that the axes are in time and minutes out to about 5 minutes. And you'll see that under the surfing condition, the same boat is pushing bubbles deeper and for a longer period of time after the boat passes. So we have a lot of this data that we're working through, trying to understand what we're actually seeing and teasing out different kinds of information about the prop wash plume. But this isn't velocity. And so this next plot shows you a comparison of, on the top is another echo plot showing the bubble plume. And the time basis here is 0 out to 8 minutes. And on the bottom is the second data set that we get off these sensors. And this is actually velocity. This is the exciting one, where we can see how the water is moving. And in this case, I'm showing you the vertical upward and downward movement of the water. So it's nothing about the same direction as the boat's moving. This is only vertical movement of the water. And you can see there's big changes. So here I'd show you on the left, the key reds are moving, the water's moving upwards, and blue, the water's moving downwards. Again, look at this 8 minutes of time. So you see over these maybe 2 or 3 minutes of chunks of time, you see this big upwelling of water, and then you see a big downwelling of water, and then another big upwelling. And it's interesting, you can tie this in together to the bubble plume. You'll note just above where you see the bubbles kind of are pushed upward, happens to be where we have a big red upward swell of water circulation. So there's just a lot to look at in here, looking at these circulations. And then what we do is get more detailed into the actual velocity. So you can imagine if you have a downward and an upward moving water column right next to each other, that's a really strong shear layer where the water is being really accelerated and twisted around. And those are the kinds of areas we want to look at more closely. And we are looking at them closely. And that's what I just wanted to share tonight, that super rich data set. There's thousands of data points here for just one single pass. And so we're being careful, and we're looking at this data and trying to understand, over all these different boats, all these different conditions, what's the story? What's the story we're seeing? And then in addition to these velocity measurements, we're doing water quality. We've done water quality measurements, and have cameras as well that are kind of documenting what we're seeing. So the last slide here is getting back to this transverse wave. This is actually the same information I'm showing you on the bottom plot, but I'm zooming in on just the first minute. And you can kind of see the different bands here. And when I blow it up, you really see these are oscillating bands. Again, this is the vertical water moving upward and downward, and you see this change from downward to upward to downward to upward. And this is, in fact, what is the transverse wave. We can measure the wave period, how many seconds between each wave crest, and it's about 3 seconds. And that's exactly what we observe from the water surface. So we know these are the transverse waves produced by the boat. And you can see that they're moving water pretty consistently over long periods of time. And so this is an effect we honestly didn't anticipate seeing when we originally got into this work, but it's an effect that's important, and we're looking more closely at it. So phase 2 update, we were doing preliminary analysis over last winter. The data showed measurable effects of both propeller wash and transverse waves in the water column and on the lake bottom. And we were looking at this, but we realized to publish a really thorough phase 2 report, we realized we needed additional data to tell the full story. And unfortunately, we were successful in getting the LCCMR funding. So we were awarded an ENRTF funding to continue studying these boating impacts. And we wrote that with the first year of work also focusing on propeller wash. And so we made the decision to merge the first year of the LCCMR project with what was the phase 2 project. And we got in the field, we ramped up quickly over the summer, and we were in the field this fall and collected another data set to add to the 2022 data set. So we have 2 field seasons that will go into the prop wash study. So that's about all I'm going to say about phase 2. Phase 3 is the LCCMR project. So our goal here is to quantify the impacts of boat waves, wind waves, propeller wash on the environment. We started this in 2023. We need to conclude the project in 2026. We were provided $415,000 of direct money from the state of Minnesota. So thank you, Minnesotans, for this. It's fantastic. And so year 1 of this, we're expanding on the propeller wash and transverse waves. We added a couple additional water depths to our study and other analyses. Year 2 and 3 of this study will move us back into the shoreline environment. And so we'll be identifying study shorelines on lakes and really measuring them very thoroughly, and then putting out monitoring devices to monitor wind waves as well as boat waves. And then we intend to be driving boats as well to just like we've done in the past, we bring our own boats and test them under kind of independent conditions that we establish. And some of the same kind of measurements will be made, except really trying to focus on how waves translate into moving sediment, moving vegetation, and shoreline stabilization. So I think that's getting towards the end of our talk. The phase 2 and phase 3, I think many of you that have supported us, we know that people are waiting for the results from phase 2 for sure. The information on prop wash and transverse waves, the impacts, what depths to safely operate boats. We hear from a lot of people that are really needing this information. We'll just ask please for your patience while we work through this. The risk of publishing something too soon can be frankly catastrophic. And so to do the best science we can at University of Minnesota, we need this additional time to process our data, to collect the data we did this fall, and to get that report out under the same process we used last time and the same quality of work. So we're targeting that in the spring of next year. I think I've talked about what the anticipated outcomes are. We really hope to talk about the depth impact of these different effects. So that's where I'll stop, and we can take a few questions. I put both Andy and my contact information up there on our website. We really are happy to hear from people, and email's a great way to do that. Just send us a note, and we do our best to follow up with people who reach out to us. So thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm looking at some of the questions here. There's property owners want and need regulations for best practices. Where are we at with coming up with anything definitive in terms of how far from shore, how deep? Is it 500 feet? Is it 600 feet? Do you have a fix on any of those?
Not we're not following really what's being discussed at the state level. I mean, I think what we point to is our work showed that greater distances are needed from wake surf boats in order to dissipate the energy and the power and the height of those waves to something more standard of a non-wake surf boat. Greater than 500 or 600 feet needed to get wave heights to an equivalent energy level. So that's really all I can say. You may know more about what people are talking about in St. Paul or around the state.
Well, I think most policymakers are kind of looking to you. So, but for the
Yeah.
research to be done and to have something definitive, at least that's what I've been hearing. There's this myth from the boating industry that wind waves are more destructive to shorelines than wake waves, wake boat surf waves. How do you debunk that myth? Is that true? Do you know?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, a common question. It is going to be part of our study to look at wind waves. We haven't found a lot of literature on recreational boat size boat waves, and then wake surf altogether is not studied. And then wind waves. We do have a member of our team that has done quite a bit on wind waves in Minnesota. Here's a big difference is that wind waves have a really strong, large wind waves are tied to prevailing wind directions and long fetch, a long distance across the lake that wind can blow. And the receiving shorelines tend to adjust to those large winds. And so, yes, wind waves, storm waves can persist for, several hours, a full day, whatever it is. A difference between a large boat wave is those waves have no preferred direction. You can bring a large boat wave to any point on a lake. So even a cove that never sees big wind waves can receive big boat waves. And that, I think, is the point of concern. So areas that are very soft sediments or haven't seen large disturbances like this, we want to know how those big waves impact those areas of a lake.
Do you think the downward movement of the water and the upward movement of the water is an energy transfer? So every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Is that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if your question is about the waves, a wave is essentially a wave, right? And but one of the things we'll be looking for is the wavelength of a wave really sets. It's also, we see the surface, but the wave is also extended down into the water column. So longer wavelengths extend farther down into the water, and they'll hit the bottom in deeper depths, right? They'll start to interact with the lake bottom. We're hypothesizing that these boat waves, especially like a transverse wave, even divergent waves, have a longer wavelength for boats than they do in wind waves. But that's some of the information we really want to verify in this next study. So that would say, so if boat have longer wavelengths, that means that they're starting to feel the bottom in deeper water. And that would be one area where they're having a greater impact than a large, let's say, a wind wave of the same height as a boat wave, but the wavelengths are shorter in the wind wave. The boat wave's going to have more impact because it's going to reach farther down into the lake, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And then just to be clear, someone asked that they're a supporter of the research, but is this program also funded by MACERC? And I don't believe there's not a lot of crossover between.
No, that's right. MACERC is not funding us, but they're a supporter in terms of we're colleagues, and one of our person on our team, Jessica Kozarek, is a MACERC fellow. So there's a lot of crossover between MACERC and St. Anthony Falls Lab and their colleagues. But in this case, their funding is separate from ours.
And those are all let me see if there's anything else. How does lake size affect these studies? Specifically, smaller lakes would only experience a maximum wave height based on the size, topography and size. They're looking at Sylvan Lake, which is 800 acres. I assume that has a difference in terms of the number of
I think
the waves, the size of the waves, and
I think this carrying capacity of how many boats can we have on a lake of a certain size. I think the results of our work aren't for a single boat aren't impacted by size. Here's what is impacted. We studied one type of shoreline, Lake Independence, with a certain slope. There are lakes that have really deep, it's deep right up to the shoreline, and there's lakes that are very shallow, and there will be variations on our finding based on that depth profile of a lake. We tried to pick something that was kind of middle of the road, typical for what we see in the state. But lake size really, I think the other factor will be depth. When we come out with this new study in the spring, then we can talk more about depth. So if we've got lakes that are 12 feet, and that's the deepest spot, versus lakes that have lots of area of 40, 50 feet, 30 feet, that's a different story, right? So lake depth, and I'd say the distance from shore is really it's more about how many boats can operate on a small lake before we just have hit our capacity, and that our study has not addressed, to be honest with you. So
and then Jane Shallow, thanks, has posted, if you look in the Q&A section, riparian restoration grants from $40,000 to $60,000 for shoreline restoration for publicly accessed lakes. Deadline is January 31st, 2024. And the awards are August 2024 through National Fish and Wildlife. So the link is there. And then one last question on what's the difference between wave energy and wave power?
Oh, great question. So I have to pull up another talk. So they're different. Wave energy is wave power is essentially the rate that energy is moving towards the shoreline. And how to think of it. We measured the energy in all of the wave packets, so that think about a battery has a certain amount of power within it. You can give power for a certain amount of time. The wave packet has a certain amount of energy. What the power gets at is how quickly that energy is moving towards the shoreline, or actually received by the shoreline. So they are different quantities. If you look in our paper, you'll see that the wave power of the wake surf boats was, Andy, I can't remember the number, 6 to 12 times greater than non-wake surf boats. So it's a great question, because I might have done a clunky job of explaining the difference, but the question that it brings is, what's the right unit to be looking at when we get to the point of saying this shoreline can only take us so much energy or so much power or so much height? What's the right metric for us to use? And that's something we want to try to look at and tease out. From what we've read, people haven't answered that question. It's really easy for us as citizens to see high wave, big waves, think about wave height, but it's the energy and power that are perhaps really what we need to look at as doing damage, or if we want to protect our shorelines, what we need to design to a certain energy or power level. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And great to be with everybody again. And hopefully we can see you all next year sometime.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Have a good evening. And thanks, Andy.
All right. Thank you. We'll sign off.
Okay. And thank you everyone for coming. I think the big takeaway, the moment in time that we're looking at right now as we define the problem that we're really working to address here, is that Minnesota's lakes and rivers are degrading across the state. In 2018, Minnesota Pollution Control listed 40% of the surface waters in the state as impaired. By 2021, it was 56% impaired. Last month, the MPCA added an additional 54 water bodies to the list. The biggest threats that we're focused on are, the continued spread of aquatic invasive species, runoff pollution of phosphorus, nitrogen, and pesticides, herbicides, fungicides from big ag operations, mining-related sulfide pollution from mineral extraction and processing, and the poor development of shorelines and destructive boating practices. So lake ecology, which is, you know, what Jeff was kind of touching on, and here's kind of the core of the issue. Each of the above threats, each of these threats has a highly organized and well-moneyed special interest group working to protect the status quo. So angling groups and tourism boards often fear that limiting access or even slowing access to our lakes by having inspectors at the accesses or boat cleaning will reduce tourism. And this frustrates attempts to prevent the continued spread of AIS. Agricultural interests working to weaken or block best practices mandates, including those designed to protect water, like the buffer law that we all saw that hit a lot of opposition during the Dayton administration. Large international mining corporations, all of which have a terrible history with regard to water and air pollution, are working to prevent regulation or permitting intended to prevent history from repeating itself, you know, in terms of, you know, they have a history of degrading waters. And then, you know, county variance boards and others that are, you know, really looking at how can they increase their local tax bases, often approve variance requests. Over 80% of the time, 80% of variances are approved for projects that run counter to ordinances enacted to protect water resources. Progress on any one of these issues brings us into conflict with these highly organized advocacy groups and special interests. And we need to increase our capacity so that we can meet this moment. That's kind of the bad news. The good news is that there's 500 plus lake associations in Minnesota. The Concordia study back in 2017 found that there's an estimated membership of 200 per lake association. That's 100,000 people that are members of lake associations in Minnesota. And if you really think about it, it's probably 200,000 because most memberships to a lake association are family, husband and wife, you know. So what that means is there's more Minnesotans affiliated with a lake association than with Minnesota Teachers Union, more than in the Farmers Union. That's at about almost 50,000, more than any other nonprofit in Minnesota. Just to put it very directly, lake associations are the largest civic membership group in the state, but we lack the power we need to address these issues to fully protect water because we're not organized into a single advocacy organization. And if we want to enjoy clean and healthy lakes with loons, fish, otters, other wildlife, and even humans, then we need to organize all lake association members and others with a passion for water into a focused and energized civic group. And that's really what kind of the core of what we've come away with this year, this sort of deep dive into speaking with people. I'd love to get emails on your thoughts on how we should go about doing this. You're going to hear more about this. You know, we can, you know, become very concerned with, you know, this issue or that issue on our lakes. But what I see is that most lakes have very similar issues, and the problems they're dealing with are really originating at a state level. So that piece is critically important. Organizing people across the state and moving water issues and protecting water to the front of everyone's agenda is really the core effort that I think we need to engage in order to be successful. Once again, thank you to everyone who came. I hear some questions popping up. Let me scroll down. Oh, the grant link. I can send that out. Let me see if there's a way to make it public here. I'll send out that grant link after the meeting to everyone via email so that you can get it. Let me make sure I have a copy of it here. Kate says, Kate Haxton wants to bring, who's with the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwa, is on the meeting, and she wants to bring the program to local Indian councils. That would be wonderful, Kate. Thank you. Mostly it's just thanks. Any success with engaging angling organizations, including Min Fish? Not really, Chuck. That's been getting them on board with AIS efforts has been a struggle. I think it's that access piece. I think that, more and more, some of the members that, are really strongly in favor of, AIS efforts, others less so. They haven't, as far as I know, they haven't reached out to me and wanted to take a stand on any AIS issues. Thank you, everyone. I guess the questions are kind of turning into thank yous. And that seems like most of the questions that are coming through. I'm grateful to all of you for coming tonight. Thank you. Please stay in touch. Have a great Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's. Celebrate these darkest days of the year with lots of light, and be well until we see each other again. Thank you.